long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. What am I talking about? Right? If anyone says Star Trek, you need to go downstairs. It's Star Wars. Do you remember the original Star Wars trilogy? Okay. How many people went to the movies and saw it? Went to the theater and saw it? Okay. I'm not going to ask how many went more than once to see it. But it was that kind of movie, wasn't it? No, not movie, but series of trilogy. Spread out from 1977 to 1983. Back in the last century, so the teens tell me. And these were three movies that made an impact on our society. Not just in that they told a compelling story, but they also smashed or established new standards for special effects, for the type of cameras and technology that was used. They also created the concept of a movie franchise. It was a trilogy. And on top of it being a trilogy that kept you coming back, there was also all the little figurines and Star Wars lunch pails and backpacks and t-shirts and the market, like there was never that. So Gone with the Wind is the other movie that prior to Star Wars had the biggest box office. But you never got a Gone with the Wind backpack. Okay. Homework, yes, sure, Gone with the Wind, but not the backpack or the lunch pail or the figurine. And so Star Wars started something new in the way that we consumed movies. In this case, every 3 years, a new blockbuster was coming out. Now, unless you were a Star Wars fanatic, you probably thought that the series was done and dusted after Return of the Jedi in 1983, right? You thought that was good. Really enjoyed that story, that series. And then, in 1999, a new Star Wars movie was released. Even more surprising, when the new movie was released, is that it was a prequel. It didn't add to carry the story forward. It went backwards to the beginning. And little did we know that the movies that we'd watched since 1977 to 1999 were actually, thinking they were numbers 1, 2, 3, were actually numbers 4, 5, and 6. And although we'd been perfectly happy with numbers 4, 5, and 6, George Lucas wanted us to know where everything had come from. Where did it begin? How did we get to the point of having what we thought of was the beginning in number 4? He wanted us to know who the people were. He wanted us to know their world and the universe that they lived in. He also wanted to introduce Jar Jar Binks, apparently, but I don't know why. And so now we have 6 episodes, or 2 trilogies, that are part of Star Wars. And then, lo and behold, in 2015, along came the final 3 movies that finally completed the story that started being told 40 plus years earlier. That's a franchise, isn't it? 40 years of movies. Now, I want to suggest today that reading the Bible can actually be more like this than we often imagine. We read a story in the life of Jesus, and we think we know what it's all about. Okay? And then we're surprised when we discover that that story has a prequel in the Old Testament. That we need to understand the prequel in the Old Testament to understand the significance of the events that are happening in this story that we just read in the Gospels. And once we've consumed that and we understand this, now we're ready to move on with the rest of the story. Okay? To get to the ending that still awaits us. Today, as I said, is widely known as Palm Sunday. The day where we celebrate Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a young donkey. It's a strange thing to celebrate, isn't it? Okay. There are a lot of people riding into Jerusalem on donkeys. Yeah? It wasn't an unusual thing to have happen. But there was something about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem that was different. And so the story begins much earlier, long, long ago. There in the early days of the kingdom of Israel, maybe around the time of Solomon, a poet put pen to paper. And he wrote these words in Psalm 72. May he, the king, rule from sea to sea, and from the river, that is the Euphrates, to the ends of the earth. Jumping down, for he will deliver the needy who cry out, the afflicted who have no one to help. He will take pity on the weak and the needy, and save the needy from death. He will rescue them from oppression and violence, for precious is their blood in his sight. And so this poet praises the king. Maybe sets out expectations for the king, how he expects the king to conduct himself. But the psalm as a whole is a song of praise to Israel's king. And over time, though, it's so idealistic as you read through it, that Israel and the scholars, the priests, the prophets came to see this as pointing to a Messiah. As the actual kings of Israel became corrupt, began worshipping other gods, other idols, failed to live up to this description in Psalm 72. The religious leaders and scholars said, you know, I don't think this psalm is about our king, because he doesn't look anything like this. But we have a promise that one day there will be someone from a descendant of David to sit on the throne in Jerusalem. And I believe that this psalm is a description of him. And so the psalm took on this messianic hope for the future. That there would be this ideal king who would come. And it's interesting to see what the definition of an ideal king is. And just in those particular verses, the emphasis is on how he cares for the weak and the needy. How he rescues people from oppression and violence. Centuries later, the prophet Zechariah also writes a description of God's future king. Now, Zechariah is on the other side of exile. The kings had reached a point that they were so bad the nation, both the northern nation of Israel, the southern nation of Judah, have been defeated by their enemies, by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians. Many of the residents, of the citizens, have been taken into Babylonian captivity, and after 70 years, 100 years, they've made their way back to Jerusalem. But they don't have a king. And so Zechariah is looking to inspire the people, to give them hope. And he says the promise of the Messiah is still valid. God hasn't forgotten us. And so he writes this description in chapter 9. He says, "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth." I think Zechariah may have sung Psalm 72 once or twice. The picture that Zechariah here paints is of a king returning from battle. And Zechariah is telling the people, it's almost in a poem in this section, a poem or a song, he is telling the people to celebrate the arrival of the king. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious. He's gone out, he's defeated whatever was out there, and now he's coming back to Jerusalem. And then he says, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. And you go, well, that's strange. Right? He's victorious, right? He's just defeated all these enemies. And then he says, it continues on, and God says, I'll take away the chariots from Ephraim. Ephraim was the northern nations, northern nation of Israel that often attacked and made life difficult for those living in Jerusalem. He says, but he's going to take away the chariots, and he's going to take away the war horses from Jerusalem. And the battle bow will be broken. And so, when he removes the weapons, is basically what it says. He's removing the chariots, removing the war horses, removing the battle bows. And then the next line says, he will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from the river to the ends of the earth. It never happened. It sounds great, doesn't it? It never happened. And so now as we continue moving forward, we come to John chapter 12. And we find Jesus. And be aware here, many of the prophecies made about Jesus or made about the Messiah, Jesus had no say in. Jesus had no say in where he was born. Right? So if there's a prophecy that says the descendant of David will come out of the town of Bethlehem, Jesus can't manipulate that. That's if he's born in Nazareth, it's like, well, that just, Mary got a cold and couldn't travel to Bethlehem. The whole thing's messed up. But here, Jesus chooses to make a statement. He knows who's coming into Jerusalem. And he says to his disciples, go and get me a donkey. And he sits on the donkey. And he walks or travels into Jerusalem. The people see this, and they took out palm branches and went to meet him, shouting, Hosanna, God save us, but just sort of a praise God word. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as is written, do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. So when we see this quote and it comes from Zechariah, we go, what was Zechariah talking about? In our way of reading, in English, in Western culture, we want to just look at that quote and say, what's the meaning of this particular words? But for them, a quote like this from the prophets or from the Torah, it was like brought attention to that whole section. What's its context? What's going on? What does it remind us of? What was the message of the prophet at that time, or the message of the writer? Okay? Sort of in a way we can say the Ten Commandments. We all know the whole thing, don't we? Okay, pretty much. There's not a quiz. But we pretty much know what the Ten Commandments are just by saying the Ten Commandments. And so for them to just quote, do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. The people cheering Jesus are very clear about who they think he is. The King of Israel. We see that at the beginning, the Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And if you just say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, you say, who is it that comes in the name of the Lord? Is that anyone? And then, blessed is the King of Israel. They had a clear picture of who was entering Jerusalem. And the fact that he was riding on a donkey, that he chose to ride on a donkey, takes them to Zechariah. And Zechariah is about this Messiah, isn't it? That someday there's going to be a king that enters Jerusalem, righteous and victorious. And that he's going to remove weaponry. He's going to institute peace. And this will spread from the Euphrates, which they regarded as kind of one end of the known world, to wherever the other end of the known world was. That's going to happen, and Jesus is riding in, the King Jesus is riding in on a donkey. Jesus' message, though, is twofold. Why does Jesus choose to enter Jerusalem in this way? I mean, like, if you want to be safe, don't you, like, sneak in at night? Right? Climb the wall, have a friend, put down a rope ladder, you know, and you get in under the cover of darkness, nobody sees you, and you can celebrate the Passover safely. Jesus isn't about the safety. Right? Jesus wants people to know who he is. Jesus is the Messiah. He is Israel's king. His second point, though, is that he's not riding in on a great charger. He's not riding in on a war horse. He's riding in on a donkey. In my mind, it's almost like, you remember when Jesus is crucified. And before he's crucified, the Roman soldiers beat him, whip him. But one of the things they do is they put the crown of thorns on his head. Why the crown of thorns? Because you say you're a king. And they put a robe on him. And they go, "Hail to the king." And then they whip him. And so it's kind of almost the same thing here. That Jesus is saying, yeah, I'm the king, but I left all my courtiers and, the rest of the procession is left at home. I'm coming in on a donkey. And so it's interesting that although it's not here in John, if we go back to Zechariah, I don't see it there. Okay, so the word gentle shows up. So Jesus comes in righteous and victorious, but lowly, and riding on the donkey. So he intentionally lowers himself. So I want us to focus today on Zechariah 9 and the description that we find here of what to expect from this king on a donkey. The first thing, as I've already pointed out, is that the king intends to end all wars. Does that sound good? Right? Would it be good if the military went out of business? Not just our military. And I know we got some people that are invested in that here. Okay? But if it was unnecessary, if it became redundant, if Russia's military became redundant, if China's military became redundant, if military was redundant, wouldn't that be a good thing? And the reason it's a good thing is that the next thing that the gentle king does is to announce peace to the nations, expanding his kingdom, expanding his rule. Here it says from the Euphrates River in Iraq, that's where it is, to the ends of the earth. But really what he's saying, if we look at this and apply it to Jesus, is that it's a global kingdom. Right? We can talk about an end of the earth if the earth's flat. Right? You've got an edge. But when we know it's a circle, you head in one direction and you keep going to the end. And if you get your trajectory right, you'll end up back where you began. And so his rule will be a global rule, a peaceful rule. That also sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Could you do with more peace in your life? Could you do with more peace in your community, in your country, on your news, your international news? Right? I think we can all appreciate that. And so we think back, what is God's intent for humanity? What is God's intent for creation? What is God's intent for his kingdom? What does it look like? It looks like a king who removes weapons of war and institutes a kingdom of peace globally. And the third thing is actually not on the screen. It's in verse 11 of Zechariah 9. And it reads, "As for you, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from the waterless pit." And so this is the third action that this king is going to take, this gentle king. Because of God's covenant with his people. Right? The blood of my covenant. God, covenants are sealed with blood, whether it be a lamb at the Mount Sinai when Moses sprinkles the blood of the lamb on the people, sealing the covenant. And because of God's covenant with his people, he's going to announce freedom to the prisoners. In Bible times, there was no prison industrial complex. There was no real prisons. The jails, if they had any, were short term, until they decided what to do with you. Justice, as they saw it, was usually, it could be execution, it could be losing a hand, could be getting a beating, could be banished from the village. There were all sorts of different, they might take money from you, all sorts of different punishments, but none of them were 6 years in jail. The people who are prisoners are the people that have been, usually, who have been captured in war. Okay. People, and when they're captured in war as prisoners, they're not given a lot of freedoms. And so we usually call them slaves, right? Maybe indentured servants, depending on how they're treated, but then they don't have the freedom to just leave whenever they want. They're prisoners. And it goes both ways. There were Israelites who were prisoners in other lands. There were people who were prisoners, or their grandfathers, whatever, had been prisoners in Israel. But God says when this king comes, one of the things that he's going to do, because of his covenant with Israel, is he will free the prisoners. Remember, Zechariah is after the exile. There were still Israelites, still Jews living in Babylon. Maybe some wanted to come home and couldn't. God says, we're going to do away with that. We're going to put people where they need to be. They're going to have that freedom that they don't have at the moment. And so we have an end of wars. We have peace to the nations. And we have freedom for the prisoners. Freedom for the oppressed. Freedom for the enslaved. And his rule will extend from sea to shining sea. Jesus comes into Jerusalem and into our lives as a gentle king, not an authoritarian one. He's still the king. The king has laws. There's everything. I understand all of that. But where does he start? He comes into Jerusalem, introducing himself as the king, in the spirit of Zechariah. And we could go back and say in the spirit of Psalm 72. Jesus coming into Jerusalem is Star Wars, episodes 4, 5, and 6. That we thought were 1, 2, and 3. But we see that there's a bigger story being told, a bigger play taking place, and we're only just getting a glimpse of it. And we're waiting for the series to end. We're waiting for 7, 8, and 9. We're waiting for everything that's been promised to actually come to fruition. We're waiting for the king to establish his kingdom, to put it in place, for there to be this peace, for there to be this freedom and lack of oppression. Jesus promises that it's going to come, because he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, a gentle king, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem, and the battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations, which means to the people in the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Palm Sunday is not just about Jesus making the journey from Bethany to Jerusalem. It's about Jesus introducing himself as a king. Not necessarily the king that we're looking for or the king that we expect, but as the king, gentle, lowly, and riding on a donkey. And aren't there times that we need that king in our lives? You see, this isn't just about Jerusalem. It's not just about Israel. It's about us and who is our king. Is our king gentle? Is our king someone that we can approach? Is our king someone we can talk to? Is our king someone who we believe can free us, can give us freedom, can take away whatever it is holding us back, can bring peace into our lives? Do we believe that that's our king? Because Jesus is saying, I am the king, but I ride on a donkey. And it's a message that I think we all need to take to hearts. Hosanna. Hosanna. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel, the King of the church, the King of you and I.